Hi there. The 27-day challenge for February is to use an old collection or kit, and I already created a layout with the Maggie Holmes Collection, and now I'm about to do a couple of cards. So I'm going to start with my Caterpillar Pro, which is my larger sized trimmer. I recently got the Crop, but I'm going to use the Pro today. The Crop is just the smaller version of this same one, and I'm starting with some 8.5 by 11 cardstock from Stampin' Up! And I can't even tell you the colors. Okay, I just looked them up. They are Midnight Muse and Raspberry Ripple. They're two of the in colors from 2013. And when you, people who make cards probably already know this, but when you are making cards, you want to to make a standard A2 card, you just want to cut your 8.5 by 11 cardstock into half so that it is 8.5 by 5.5, and then you score it at the mark that I was showing right there, which is 4.25. So I scored them all, and then when you're folding your cards, again, this is just for people who are new to making cards. I'm no expert, but you do want to fold your cards so that when you score, you get a little mountain side and a little valley side. You want to fold so that the mountain is on the inside of your card, which is a little counterintuitive. When I first started making cards, I was folding it the opposite way. So I cut all of my card bases, and I'm not going to make that many cards. I just grabbed some cardstock because I usually have a bunch of bases already made, so I just decided to make a whole bunch since I was cutting some. And now what I'm doing is I'm cutting some mats for the inside of my cards, and I cut my mats to 5.25 by 4. And that just gives me a 1/4 inch border. It's a 1/4 inch smaller, so it gives me about a 1/8 of an inch border around the edges of the card. And I really like that look. That's my favorite size mat for a card. So I have my card bases and I have my card inserts. I'm just going to put them aside, but I am going to keep one card and one insert out just because it helps me figure out the sizing. As I mentioned many times on my channel, I'm not great at making cards. I'm no expert, and so I really don't get the scale at this point. So I'm still needing to refer a lot to how big a card really is and that sort of thing, and figure out what kind of scale and sizing I want for the items that are on my card. See, I really like that, but that's going to be too big for a card. I mean, I could probably make it work. I'm thinking about it. And so I'm just looking through the embellishments, and I want to use one of these frames, but a lot of them are really big. There was only one of the small ones left, so I'm going to use this green, and it's a green pattern with some little yellow flowers on it. It's really cute, and it's got a little banner stapled to the edge of it. And so I'm going to use that for my card, and I'm just thinking about what stickers or other embellishments I want to use. And so I went to my little embellishment trays, and I'm going to take advantage of these little clips. I never know how to use them in scrapbooking. I often tear the clips off of them and use them as an embellishment, but I thought it might make a nice looking clip on this card. There we go. So I'm just going to stick some wax paper on the back of this just to temporarily make it not sticky, but I'm actually going to end up leaving it there rather than tearing it off and putting pop dots on it. I'm just going to leave it in place. So that looks pretty good. I like how that looks. And what I'm trying to do with scrapbooking, and people have told me this, not with scrapbooking, but with card making, card making, people say it isn't that hard. I think it is hard, but whatever. I believe you if you say so. But that hasn't been my experience. That's all. People have told me you just need to, take your scrapbooking principles and apply it to a smaller canvas. And that makes good sense. And I've heard that many times, and I try to think about that. But I don't know. It's just, I found it hard until recently. I'm finding it a little bit easier recently, and I guess there's a difference between knowing something with your mind and then just knowing it from doing it. And so I had to make a couple of cards. I made some recently and I didn't show them yet. Maybe I'll show them in my month review. But I didn't show them yet. And I just found it quite a bit easier and more pleasant. So I decided that I would go ahead and make some more cards, since I don't find it a horrible experience anymore. It's not I used to really, really dislike making cards. It's hard because, you see other people's cards and they're so beautiful, and I just want to make a beautiful card so I can give it to somebody, but mine never turn out beautiful in my own mind. So anyhow, I think it's different because you give cards away, and I don't want to give somebody something that I don't think is beautiful. Like, it's different if it's a layout. I can just stick it in my book and say, oh, well, it's done, right? And the memory is captured and the story is told. But with a card, the only purpose of it is to look pretty, to give to somebody. So I want it to look pretty. Anyhow, I have these rectangles that are made by Lawn Fawn. They're rectangle dies, and they give you a nice, pretty stitched border around the edges. And I really, really love that look on cards. So I'm trying to make all of my cards have stitched borders on them because I think it just looks really pretty. It's worth the extra time to run it through your die cut machine instead of just trimming it to that size. Now, this is it's the largest stitch die, so it is designed to be the exact size of the card front, but because I only had a tiny bit of this paper, I had to cut it a little bit smaller, so the paper didn't fully fill the die, and so it's not quite as wide as it should be, which means I'm just going to trim up the card base at the very, very end of my project. So here are all my components of this card. I have this label with the paper clip on it or it's kind of like a bobby pin. And I'm just using some Stampin' Up! Dimensional adhesive. I like the Stampin' Up! Dimensional adhesive, especially on cards, because it's half the width of some of the other dimensional adhesive that I have. And then I'm just going to put more Stampin' Up! Dimensional adhesive on this one. And I'm doubling up this one end because the end is going to hang off the edge. And because I have dimensionals on two things, I need it to be double width at the other end so it doesn't kind of bend. Now, I forgot that I was going to trim up this card, and I went ahead and centered that sentiment. And I'm going to get a sentiment from a Lawn Fawn stamp set in a second. First, I'm going to stamp my personalized stamp. It says created by Tracy. I ordered these from Stamp Out Line on Etsy, and I don't even know if they're still around. But when I go to post this video, I'll try to remember to look for it and post the link if they do exist. It was a long time ago that I ordered these stamps. And so I can't remember what size punch I'm supposed to use. I used to know back when I used to make lots of cards. It's the 1 7/16 circle punch by Marvy. And it punches very, very close to the edge of that design, but I like it. It's a little crowded looking, but I still like it anyways. It's the best. My next biggest punch is just too big, so I like to use that size. And then I'm going to use my Stampin' Up! Scallop circle, which is 2 3, no, it's 1 3/4. And so they layer quite nicely together, those two. And I just took some Stampin' Up! Craft cardstock and punched the scallop circle. And I think I just used a piece of scrap paper for my personalized stamp. And now I'm going to put this background on the card, and it's going to take me a while to get it straight. And the reason that there's a problem here is that that piece of wood grain paper is not the same size as the card base. And so I thought about making just a little bit of pink show on either side, but I couldn't get it even because I'm working with such a tiny little difference. So I decided to just scooch it over to one side so that it fully covers the card, and then I'll just take a sliver off of the entire card base. And the Caterpillar Pro is excellent for taking slivers off of things. As you see, it cuts very, very precisely and leaves such a little bit that it actually curls up, which I think is really cool. So now I'm just going to use my grid mat to help me center this. I want the overall frame to be centered, and then the designs are obviously off center on it. And I like how that looks. I think that's a pretty card. I'm going to give it to Sophia for her birthday. I've already given her a card for her birthday. This is a late card. I gave her one on her birthday, but we're celebrating her birthday today. And so I decided to make this card for her because her birthday got a little bit lost in the shuffle. We didn't really celebrate it because it was too close to Camilla leaving and just lots going on in our family at that point. There were auditions and stuff, just stuff, life gets in the way sometimes. So we're celebrating her birthday today. It's about a week or so late. So this is a Lawn Fawn sentiment stamp, and I'm thinking, oh, I don't need my Misty tool. I'm just going to stamp with my block. And look, I should have used my Misty tool, because if I had used my Misty tool, if it came out like that, I could have just re-stamped it and it would have been in exactly the right place. So again, I didn't use my Misty tool, but it's easier to stamp on a spare piece of paper, like on a piece of paper that isn't attached to something. So I just re-stamped it because I cut a whole bunch of bases or inserts, and so I just replaced it with another insert. You will see my Misty tool later in this video because I do end up pulling it out. And here I'm just going to put the date of Sophia's birthday, even though it's not today's date. And I think I'm using Stampin' Up! Basic Gray to do that. Yep. And that roller date stamp works perfectly with that little date banner thing. It's probably not a coincidence that it fits a standard roller date stamp, because there are little slashes in between where the dates would go and they line up perfectly. So I'm calling that card done, and I'm moving on to work on the next one. Now my next card is, and so see, this is where I wish that Lawn Fawn made a stitched rectangle die that was 5 1/4 by 4, because as I mentioned, that's the mat size that I like to use the most. And I think that's the mat size that a lot of card makers use. I don't know. I have to admit, I don't really follow card makers very much. I find them very intimidating. I can't do what they do, so it frustrates me. Oh my goodness. Anyhow, so yes, I wish that they had a 5 1/4 by 4 inch stitched rectangle, but this one will do. This one is, let me check and see how big it is. It's 5 by 3.75, which means it is a 1/4 inch bigger than I would like it to be all the way around. Or no, just a 1/4 inch bigger, which means that I'm having a 1/4 inch mat around my card instead of having an 1/8 of an inch mat, which is what I prefer, but that's okay. I'll work with it. I really like that stitched border, so it's worth it to have a bigger, it means that the blue section around the card is bigger. So this is Midnight Muse ribbon from Stampin' Up! And I'm just putting it around the middle of this card. And this is my standard, I don't know what to do to make a card design. It's a piece of pattern paper that I love, and so that camera paper is something that I love, with a piece of ribbon around the middle and then something stuck to the center of it. So in this case, I'm going to be die cutting a circle. I'm thinking about using that Thinking of You die, but I'm not going to. It's a sentiment die. I don't know where I got it. So these are my Lawn Fawn stamps and dies. This is where I keep all of my stamp sets that have matching dies with them. I keep them in these Avery pockets. And this one is actually the only one in that set that's not a Lawn Fawn stamp. It's a Simon Says stamp set. I do not particularly like the quality of these stamps. So I kind of decided that I want to use the speech bubble, and I'm thinking I also think that the speech bubble might be too small. So I'm going to cut both the circle and the speech bubble and see how it goes. I'm kind of winging it. I don't really know what I'm doing here, but I'm going to stamp it on this vanilla paper from Stampin' Up! I was going to use white, but there's the other the background paper is vanilla based. So I'm going to run those both through at the same time on my big shot. So I have a stitched circle there, and then I have a speech bubble as well. Now I have to cut the die cut of the speech bubble before I do the stamping, because the dies in this set are not hollow like the Lawn Fawn ones are. So I have to now use my Misty tool, and I shouldn't have done this. I have a piece of plastic that I put in the corner. I just scooch it up into the corner, but I was feeling lazy. I don't know what I was doing here, but I decided to glue my speech bubble to the paper instead of gluing it to a piece of plastic. And anyhow, it's just going to rip the paper, but that's fine. It's just graph paper that I cut out of a notebook to fit the Misty perfectly. So I'm using some VersaFine, some Versamark embossing glue, and I've inked up my sentiment stamp, and I'm stamping it out onto the speech bubble. And see here, I am just ripping up that perfectly good piece of graph paper that I could have used again, but that's okay. You see, I've got a whole stack of papers there. So now I have to find my little paper, my little, what are those called? Tweezers. I'm terrible at using tweezers. Any kind of tools I'm bad at using. I'm much better at just using my own hands. So I'm just giving it a tap. I didn't run my dryer sheet over this to make sure that the stray pieces didn't stick. So now I have to go back with my brush. It's just a very fine brush. I'm sorry, I'm out of screen. I didn't realize I had it zoomed in. But what I do here is I loosen it with the edges of the brush, and I blow at the same time. The blowing is really, really important, because as soon as the piece of embossing powder is dislodged, if you're blowing, it'll just disappear right off, like it'll just blow away, as opposed to just moving and sticking someplace else on the cardstock. That's just a tip that I learned along the way of making mini albums. I used to do mini albums with a whole lot of embossing, and that's just what I learned was the way to get rid of stray pieces of embossing powder. I'm a little bit OCD about having little stray pieces of embossing powder on my projects. I really hate that. It bothers me a lot, even though people will tell me, oh, I can't even notice it. I notice it and it bothers me, so I try to avoid it. Look at how beautiful that looks when it's embossed. It's so pretty. I really like that. So just for the record, I think you're pretty amazing. And it's a great sentiment, and I love how it looks in that shiny embossed black ink. So I just hit that with my heat gun, and it only took a second for it to melt, and now it's all shiny and pretty. And now I went through my stamps again and found some Lawn Fawn stamps that I like. These are they're from the Science of Love set, and I have the dies for them as well. And you just saw me get a piece of Neenah Solar white paper, because I'm going to be doing some Copic coloring, some very, very basic Copic coloring. And so I'm using Memento ink for this, because I'll be using my Copic markers on them. And there's no point in stamping one bird when you can stamp 3 birds. So that's what I did. I'm just making sure that I have the right die out, and I had grabbed the wrong one by accident. So there's the right one. And I grabbed my Copics, and I don't have a huge collection of Copics, so I'm just kind of looking at, I want a pink, and I don't know if I'm going to use different shades of red or different shades of RV. So I pulled out 2 different, and with something this small, I've used 3. I know that you're supposed to use 3 different colors, and I do that with bigger images, and I've done that before with these, but I just find that it doesn't make that big of a difference if you use so this marker was really blobby, and like there was too much alcohol coming out of it. See that? Ruined it right there. So someone gave me a tip on YouTube. I can't remember who it was, but thank you, whoever you are. You told me that when that happens, you should just open the other end of the marker and it comes to equilibrium or something. And so that's what I did there, and it fixed the problem with the marker very, very well. So thanks for that tip. And my second bird was much more successful. And so what I do is I just, I usually color in the middle. In this one I didn't. I don't know why. I just had the other marker open already. But usually I'll show you what I do on the next bird. So I just wanted to add a little bit more of the darkness on the bottom part of this bird, and yeah. So I chose two RV colors. I can't remember which two I used. Maybe I will look it up and put it in the information section for this video. But this is what I usually do. I just do the center of the bird with the light color, and then the outside edges with the dark color. This is just the way that I do it. I find if I do it any other way, I tend to have the marker go outside of the lines in the darker area, or the darker area just gets too filled up with ink. So then I go back like that, and then I just feather in. I'm pulling, so I'm putting my marker on the paper by the dark, and I'm pulling it in towards the light all the way around to blend it. And then I'll go back and do like little circular motions to blend it all together. It's not like perfect, and it's not all that professional looking, but it's done. And I find that I don't want to spend too much time coloring my images, because I find that if I spend a long time coloring, they don't look that much better than if I just color them quickly. So that's why I just use two colors for these. Now I'm going to cut out these birds, the two that came out okay. I just used some yellow on the beak. Just using a little piece of Post-it tape to hold that down. I've had Post-it tape forever, and I never remember to use it, so I just saw it there, so I decided to use it. I often use washi tape. And there we go. I love the little white border that you get around your die cuts when you use those sets of dies that go with the stamps. They're just so cute. Sorry, I forgot to zoom out. I'm just putting my scraps back in the package of Nina Solar White paper. And there are my two cute little birds. Aren't they adorable? You can't go wrong with lawn fawn stamps and dies. They're just awesome. They just always make a cute embellishment. So here's something that I'm not really loving, but I decided to just ink the edges of this speech bubble. It was just looking a little bit plain, and I didn't want to outline it. I probably should have just outlined it. It looks okay like that. I didn't want to use my blender pen to go in, like my blender tool to go in with Distress ink, because I don't know, I just didn't feel like it. At this point, I'm feeling like, this is taking a long time. I wish that these cards were already done. So anyhow, I am looking for some scraps. That's my Stampin' Up! Scrap basket. I'm sorry that I forgot to zoom out. There we go. So I'm just looking for some green, because I'm thinking that bird looks a little lonely there in the middle of the circle all by himself. So I'm going to cut a little piece of grass. So I have the Lawn Fawn Grassy Borders die, and forgot to grab my cutting mats. So there we go, the platform and the cutting mats. And that cuts, and I used a piece of Tim and Beck green polka dotted paper. And now I'm just going to, so that it fits in the circle nicely, I'm going to use that same circle die to, and it's also going to put a cute little stitched border on the bottom part of the grass. And since I have two birds, I'm going to go ahead and make another piece of grass, with the idea that I'll probably go back and make a second card with that bird. I'll have to cut another circle, but that's okay. So I think that looks pretty cute. I'm liking that. I had a moment of thinking, oh, maybe I should make the grass be that color, but it's just not different enough. I like it with the lighter color of grass. So there we go. I just turned the circle a little bit so that the ombre effect looked a little bit more interesting. I didn't want it to go just straight top from bottom. I want it to be sort of off to the side a little bit. Gives a nice contrast with that lighter color grass too, to have the darker color down by the grass. Used a Stampin' Up! Dimensional to stick that bird in place, and more Stampin' Up! Dimensionals, and I'll have to double them up on the parts where the speech bubble overhangs the circle. So there we go. Awesome. Yay! I think that looks so cute. I'm always surprised when a card comes out okay. There we go. That's really, really cute. I like that. So now I'm just going to stick a border, a mat inside of this. And at the last minute, I decided I didn't want a white mat because there's so much cream. And so I had some already cut cream colored mats, like card liners that I keep in a drawer someplace. So I just grabbed one. And then there's another one of those labels that I made for the first card. I just made 2 of them at the same time. And now because I have an extra bird and an extra piece of grass, I decided to make a 3rd card. And I'm actually going, I hope I zoom out in a second. Yeah, I do. I move it over. So I want it to have a piece of pattern in all 4 of the corners. I don't want any of the corners to have just that beige color on them. So that's how I placed the die on the pattern paper. Sorry that I forgot to zoom out. I'm just also picking another circle, and I'll run both the circle and the rectangle through my die cut machine at the same time. There we go. Because I need another circle for my little birdie to live in. Going to put those dies away now because I think I'm finished with them. And put my dies away, just cleaning up my surface a little bit so I can do some work. And now I was going to use the same ribbon, but I thought, oh, that's kind of boring. If I'm going to make another card, I should make it different. And so I thought I'd like to use this, but I also think that last card looked a little bit too, like the border, like the trim on it was a little bit too skinny. So I have this Baja Breeze ribbon in these 2 different styles of ribbon. They're from Stampin' Up! Also, and it picks up on the blue that's in the pattern paper quite nicely, the light blue. So I'm going to place that like that. I just stick them together with my ATG, and then I place it, and then I flip it over, and I'm going to just stick it. I don't want too much bulk behind this card, so I'm not using all of that ribbon because I don't really need it. There we go. That looks pretty. I'm a little mindful that, pardon me, I'm a little mindful that I don't want it to be too blue, but that's okay. The bird is a hit of pink as well, right? So if there's a lot of blue on it, it sometimes can just make that pink stand out even more, which is nice. I don't know. I think so. So I'm using some more of those Stampin' Up! Dimensionals to stick my circle in the center, and I place them so that they're above and below where the ribbon will be. I'm done with my die cutting now, so I put away the grassy border. And I'm thinking about, I'd rather not die cut another sentiment, so I'm thinking maybe I can find a sticker sentiment or something to make the bird be saying. It needs something. See that camera? I lost the camera. I don't know where that went. When I was planning to put it inside of this card, but by the time I go to place it, it's gone. So I wish I had some of the people who make cards have these giant rolls of Scotch foam tape, and I need to get me a roll of that stuff because I have to use a million little foam pieces instead. I have in the past used a piece of fun foam and just put ATG on either side of it, and that makes a good way to pop your stuff up, but I'd like to get some foam tape. So I went back to look up what the color was because I thought if I'm going to do some stamping and die cutting, I'm going to make it match, because that's one of the benefits of using Stampin' Up! Supplies is that they all coordinate nicely. So I found out that ribbon is Baja Breeze, which I already told you, but I didn't know that at the time. And so I grabbed my Baja Breeze ink, and I'm going to die cut this speech bubble. It's like a cloud speech bubble, which I actually like quite a bit better than the other speech bubble, that the one that is a statement speech bubble that I used on the other card. So I'm going to grab my Misty again. I just had to grab those 3 little circles so I didn't lose them. I placed them up on my shelf. I don't know, I should have placed that camera with them too. You know what? My camera might be stuck to my Misty tool. So anyhow, I'll go look for it in a minute. So here's what I should have done the first time, which is I stick my thing on a piece of plastic. This is a plastic that goes with the Stamp-O-Majig, which I don't need anymore now that I have the Misty tool. So I'm inking up my bubble with Baja Breeze ink and See how that works? It's very nice. And now I'm just going to leave it there and pick up my, first I have to clean off that stamp and put it away. I can't find the stamp set, so I'm just going to stick it up there. And now I'm going to pick up that Thinking of You, and I wish that I had some Mama Elephant black, but I don't. I'm looking for a pigment ink in black, so I take this chestnut roan ink instead. It's a pigment ink, and or chalk ink. I think it's a pigment ink. Anyhow, see how nicely that peels off of that Stamp-A-Majig piece of plastic, and the piece of plastic fits so nicely in the bottom corner of the Misty that it just works really well. I like it. A piece of acetate would be fine too, but as I said, I have a Stamp-A-Majig that I don't use anymore because I find that the Misty tool is much better, so I just repurposed the plastic for it. So I'm just placing those foam tapes so that the pieces of foam tape so that they are going to be where supporting the speech bubble where it overhangs. And now I'm placing those 3 little tiny clouds or little dots. Just using my Zig 2-way glue pen for this. There we go. Thinking of You. And now I'm going to take these millions of adhesive backings off of these foam pieces. Oh, God. Could I be any less efficient at this? I don't know. And there we go. My theory is that if I make enough cards, I eventually won't be this inefficient, and I will eventually get good at this. That's my theory. So there we go. I think that one looks pretty cute. I just have to add a liner. And for this one, I am going to use a white liner. I don't know what I'm looking for. Oh yeah, I'm looking for that camera. I'm going crazy looking for it. I'm like, where did it go? I'm pretty sure it must be on my Misty tool because I put the Misty tool right over it. And because it has foam on it, it's a little bit clingy, like it has static cling sometimes. All right, so I found another camera die cut that I will put on the inside of this. There we go. That's cute. So now I'm still looking for that camera, and found another camera for this card. I like that the camera kind of picks up on the pattern paper that's on the outside of the card. And then for this one, oh, that butterfly is too big. I'm not going to have room to write a greeting in there, like write a personal note. So I thought that looked really cute, that little bow just under the, and then it fits perfectly in between the 2 Ys that dangle down. So I thought that was nice. And then I'm just going to put a personalization stamp for the back so that the receiver knows that it is a personalized, like a handmade card. And this one says something about something about not throwing away this card. Hang on, I'll go get it so I can read it to you. Oh my gosh, if this is the first video you've ever watched by me, I hope that you don't think I'm always this unprepared. This is the most unprepared video I think I've ever made. So that it says, if you had any idea how hard I worked on this handmade card and how late I was up last night making it, you would never ever throw it away. And then it has my name, Tracy, in the middle. So I think that's so cute. I love that silly little sentiment on the back. So I had to stamp that one with a larger circle punch. I used my 1 3/4 inch punch, and then because of that I had to use a larger scallop punch. I used the 2 3/8 inch. Those are both from Stampin' Up. And here's how the cards look all together sitting on my table. And here's the pretty amazing one. And then the first one that I made. And then I was trying to take pictures of the last one, and Lila just wouldn't leave me alone. And she decided that she was gonna just cozy right up to the card and not let me take a picture at all. So that was the best that I could get until I moved it over. And here's a picture of it without the cat. Thanks for watching. Join my Facebook group if you want to participate in the challenge, or just participate in the challenge. You're welcome to join in on YouTube if you aren't on Facebook, or if you don't do groups or don't want to join. Take care. Have a great scrappy week.